So you do your roll down test, you get the mass of your car, you do your roll down test, and your car turns. It's a frustrating thing, but it happens. So what do you do if your car is turning? Here's a couple things. Number one to check is we want to make sure that the axles were put on perpendicular to the side of the chassis, not angled like this. And we need to make sure that's true for the front wheels. We also need to make sure that's true for the back wheels. Both sides need to be going, need to be perfectly straight across. So how do we check that? A couple ways. So the first thing to check, okay. If your teacher has one of these fancy dancy T-squares with a little piece of wood glued to the side of it, then it's really easy to check your car for an accurate wheel alignment. And what you do is put it on the, put the wood opposite the bearings. So the wood side goes to the top of the car side, and you slide your T-square up to the wheels. And they should have no gap on both sides. So if you can see that, there's zero gap between both sides of these. We're all good on that side. I flip it around, do the same thing on this side, and what you'll notice is when I'm touching on this side, there is now a gap on this side, about 1/8 of an inch of a gap. And that's telling me it's the rear wheels that have been installed, so they're kind of crooked. And this is exaggerated, but they're crooked like this. So every time I roll the car down, it's going to want to turn in that particular direction. So this way I know I don't have to mess with these. These are great, perfect. I have to do the back ones. It still works using this one, just not quite as well. And it's a little harder sometimes depending on how far apart your wheels are. That's why I like this one that's cut down. But you can still get a pretty good idea that these, it's just that we're not touching this wheel up here, but you can line it, eyeball it up and see that that one's on, and then do the same thing for the one back here. And maybe I'll do it this side with this wheel on it instead. Yeah, see, it's just not quite as easy to do, but I can tell this is touching over on here, and even though it's not right underneath it, I can still tell there would be a gap on it. So you can still use this T-square. This one's just a lot easier to check it with. Now, what do you do? Well, two things. Remember, first of all, which one is the problem, right? Which bearing is the problem? There's a couple solutions. Number one solution is to take this whole piece off, take off both bearings, and just re-glue it on. That's probably the easiest one to do. All right, so we know it's the back wheels that are causing the problem. How do we fix it? The easiest way to fix it is just to pull off both bearings. I know you did all this work, you gotta redo it. Yep, that's just what you gotta do. And so you take your wheels off, and again, I kind of hold both sides, rotate, 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 and one wheel will fall off. Now to get these bearings off, you don't want to just rip them off. Probably 90% of the time that's gonna work fine, but sometimes you break your chassis or you break a chunk out of your chassis. It's not a good thing to do. So better yet would be to use a putty knife or an X-Acto knife or some kind of thin, really thin piece of metal. You want to get underneath this glue. So I come in and just work my way underneath that glue. This I am cutting away from me because if it goes, it's gonna push off. And so I just work it. Get underneath, and there it comes. There we go. Right there, it comes off. It's pretty clean. You want to clean off that glue that is left, because oftentimes you'll just cut off a piece of glue. And you clean that off as best you can, because you don't want, when you go to reinstall these bearings, oh, a nice thing is, generally speaking, this glue just peels right off of these bearings. It's great. You don't want your bearings to have a bump. So if I left a little piece of glue on here, and this is now exaggerated again, tilted up in this way, but this one's not, then I'm gonna get more friction in there. So just try to clean that up as best you can. And then do the same thing on the other side. And then go through and hot glue your car, hot glue your bearings on again. But I wanna remind you, oops, close that knife. See, I almost did it myself. Close that knife before you put down. Make sure that you use your T-square. What happened with this particular install was that when the person was using the T-square to install their bearings, they forgot to check that this metal piece was not right up against the edge of the chassis. You need to make sure that is pushed in all the way. The other thing to check, sometimes you'll get glue or things like that on your T-square. Make sure that's cleaned off in that as well. That way this is sitting in nice and parallel. Show it on a different T-square. This one shows up a little bit better. Nice clean line all the way across. Make sure it's not like that, where you got a gap back there, or like this, where you have a gap up at the top. That will make your car turn. All right, so we got that. Then, and you do want to take off, either take off your wheel and gear, or if you have another one available, just get another axle. Sometimes these are hard to grip, so you can grab it with a pair of pliers and then rip off the glue like that, and then re-glue it on. All set. But again, making sure you're pushing all along the bottom here, holding everything in place when you glue. That is option one that makes cars turn. Sometimes you will have an imbalance of your wheels where, for whatever reason, there's just a lot of play in your wheels. So there's two fixes for that, and I have seen it turn. I don't know why it turns, actually, to be totally honest with you. I have no idea why, but it does. And so you can either do two things. One, you can push the wheels together more. That one doesn't want to go, so I'm gonna do this one. You can push the wheels together so there's just a tiny little bit of play, and that seems to help a lot. That's number one. Number two is that you can get some washers and put them in to fill up some of that gap. If there's some reason why you, like sometimes with your gear, you have to keep that gear in a certain space, certain place. And so then you can put washers on either side to make sure it doesn't, it stays where it needs to stay, basically. So if you need them, do washers help your car go faster? I don't know, you're gonna have to test that. Go try it out and see if it does for you. But that's an option. And then the only other one that is potential is that if you have a car that has all of its weight on one side, like let's say you installed the battery pack on the same side of the motor. I have seen in some cars, not all cars, where this can cause a very small turn in your car. So you can play around with where you keep your weight, your mass of things on your car, and how does that help it stay balanced. All right, so something else that can cause your car to turn is your wire placement. And so if you have wires and they're just hanging off the side of the car, those are gonna be dragging on the ground as it drives, and it's gonna want to turn that car. So make sure that you put all of your wires in a orientation that keeps them off the ground, right? So it might be that you have them wrapping around things to keep them in place. You might tape a couple of these wires down, right? You could tape these wires down in place here. That way you know they're gonna stay on the car, but keep them away from the wheel. So you also don't want to tape it down so that this wire is rubbing against that wheel. Might also cause an issue. So check your wires as well. So those are some things that can try it out and check it out and see if that can help you with your car from turning.